Eeryk and Simon.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Eeryk and Simon show. Wonderful to have you all with us this evening. Good evening, Eeryk, and nice to see you, young man.
Good evening. Nice to see you too, Simon, and everyone else that has rocked up in the chat today. Isn't it great that we've now got two chats side by side?
Oh, it's fantastic. Though it looks like I've mucked up and I don't have yours behind you at the minute, so I don't know what I did there. Maybe I need to put it over the top of you. Hang on a second. Let's see. Oh, no. Yeah, I'll sort that out later. But yeah, it's fantastic to have both of them. And guys, yeah, so you'll see that what we're doing is we're introducing the Eeryk's chat as well as mine. We're going out on a whole bunch of different channels. Tonight we're going out on X, YouTube, Rumble, Owncast, Telegram, Twitch, Instagram, and Substack. If you're watching on two of the new ones on Telegram and Substack, you may not be integrated with the chat. You certainly won't be able to on Substack, but otherwise everything should be working. All right. Now I'm going to have to sort out the chat behind Eeryk, but before I do that, I think it's probably time for us to bring up our first article. All right, take us away, Eeryk. Let me get onto that. All right, so you had this thing here from Rodney Hyde you wanted to talk to us about.
Yep. So Rodney Hyde obviously had a few words to say about Helen Clark, everyone's favourite Prime Minister of the 21st century, Helen Clark. And basically, it's titled, it's on Bassett, Brash and Hyde, but it's titled, Helen Clark Declares Elon Musk a Nazi. So up the top here it states, I struggle to believe former Prime Minister Helen Clark thinks Elon Musk is a Nazi. That doesn't stop her accusing him of being one and of him advocating genocide. Here's her post on X on the 26th of January. There's a pattern here. First the Nazi salute, and now addressing an election rally of Germany's far-right party. When does this become too much even for Trump? Or are there no limits now? Let's remember that Nazi Germany was responsible for #genocide. Now, I can't peer into her mind, but I don't believe that Helen Clark is stupid enough to believe what she is saying, and yet she says it nonetheless. It's the old communist playbook, accuse your opponents of monstrous evil and repeat the accusation endlessly. The mob are trained to chant along, and it has worked. It hasn't helped to say you are not a Nazi. All Nazis deny they are Nazis, and denials fuels the accusation. The mob just chant louder. Friends and supporters pull away, potential allies are scared off, they don't want to be similarly accused. It's a play that has worked well, but it has been overworked, and with X the responses are instant and compelling. The play has lost its sting. Helen Clark didn't originate the Elon as a Nazi accusation. She was simply a repeater of the legacy media, including the New Zealand Herald. She knows her tribe. The accusation is made. She plays along, amplifying it for the mob. No doubt the irony of her taking to X to denounce its owner was lost on her. How crazy is it? Elon Musk invested $44 billion in X so Helen Clark could call him a Nazi. Elon Musk stands accused because he enthusiastically thanked Trump supporters, saying his heart goes out to them and gesturing with his hand, going from his heart to the crowd. That was enough. Was that a Nazi salute? Yes, it was. He's a Nazi. Scream it from the rooftops, fill the airwaves, make it the front page, load up X, pile in. Look, even former Prime Minister Helen Clark of New Zealand says he's a Nazi. Very well. So before I continue, I do want to make mention of how similarly the left acts in New Zealand. They do the exact same thing with David Seymour. They've just repeated the idea that he's a racist, that the coalition's racist, that the coalition's far right, or the most right-wing coalition we've had in many, many, many years, or maybe even ever. And they just keep repeating it until supposedly everyone believes it, or at least a good chunk of the population believes it, which is why, for some reason, they're all going back to Labour, because that makes total sense. So it is a playbook that works, it's tried, it's tested, and they just keep doing it. And I don't think they're particularly interested in changing up their strategy anytime soon.
Yeah, well, it's you get this kind of collective effort from the left always to to rewrite history and to control the narrative. And you see them doing it all the time, right? They'll just keep repeating a lie until it becomes the truth. And you see this from absolutely everything. You see them doing it with Albert Park. They're saying Albert Park was rainbow joy and trans love, and it was an expression of peace and happiness. And they keep repeating that, even when the whole world is watching a whole bunch of leftists beating the pulp out of women and the elderly. And we see this here from Uncle Helen. Now, he is probably the second worst prime minister New Zealand has ever had. He's an absolute Stalinist, and also inflicted a doom upon our country. And what I thought was also really astonishing from him earlier this week was him talking about on X about a populist right-wing government forming in Belgium, and was saying that there's this divisive rhetoric which is a real concern around the world. And it's just astonishing that he would have the balls to say that when his acolyte Jacinda Ardern had spent 5 years dividing this country, talking about two classes of citizen, about how democracy had changed, all of this sort of stuff. Where was Uncle Helen when divisiveness was being promulgated by her office assistant?
Yeah, and what scares me is that we can sit here as a country, listen to Jacinda Ardern, openly admit that she deliberately created two classes of citizen, and so many people still believe that she was a great prime minister and did a fantastic job and never divided anyone and did everything she possibly could to prevent division. I mean, how could you listen to a prime minister state that and still be delusional enough to give her any sort of credit and place any value on her time in that role at all? I think it's absolutely nonsensical.
Yeah, the other thing, have you noticed that she's got most of X blocked? And one of the things that the leftists do is they like to create their own echo chambers, right? Because the left-wing ideology just does not ever compete in the marketplace of ideas. So this is why you get them shutting down and shutting out any ideas that they don't like. That's why many of them have migrated over to Blue Hair Sky, and it's why Uncle Helen is using a leftist-approved block list. And what happens is anyone who is inclined to express anything like a right-wing opinion gets added to that list, and all of the leftists, you see a whole bunch of them use that same list so that they can filter out anything that they don't agree with. It's the same reason Uncle Helen does that, for the same reason that one of those extremists grabbed the microphone out of David Seymour's hand twice today. Some welfare guzzling dude who looks like he's got a prurient interest in children and facial tattoos wants to suppress David Seymour's free speech, wants to ensure that the conversation can't be held, wants to ensure that there can be no debate because his ideas don't stand up in the marketplace of ideas. It's the same thing with Uncle Helen. And the thing that really gets me about that man is he's just so transparent. When he was number 2 or number 3 at the UN, when he was talking about how UNRWA was just this really wonderful UN thing that everyone should donate money to, it was just transparently not the case, and yet just by regurgitating this nonsense again and again and again, figures that he can change what people think. And to be honest, he's actually probably right. For many leftists, they're just such NPCs. They just agree with this stuff. Uncle Helen says it must be true.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do like that nickname. She was actually the first prime minister that I ever laid my eyes on. How tragic is that? She visited my school as I think I was maybe 7. That would have been 2007, just before she got booted out. Well, that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, I'll continue on with the article here now. Helen Clark adds that Elon Musk endorses the German party AfD, which is a conservative party that opponents label right-wing. Germany, right-wing extremist, Nazi salute, and so Helen Clark adds #genocide. Of course, Elon Musk's actual crime is switching his support to Trump. The attack on Musk is to get at Trump. Elon is just collateral. Think about that. Our former Prime Minister is calling the world's greatest entrepreneur a Nazi as a way of attacking the President of the United States. Her post on X makes the motive clear. She doesn't care about the damage or recklessness of her post. Her target is Trump. Her ends justify her means, and any pain in her to just necessary collateral damage. It's nasty. The very day before Helen Clark declared Musk a Nazi, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to X to defend Elon, saying Elon is a great friend of Israel and that he is being falsely smeared. That's a strong signal that Elon is not a Nazi. Meanwhile, Helen Clark supports UNRWA, calls for a ceasefire and demands a two-state solution. She is no friend of Israel. As Elon Musk noted on X, the radical leftists are really upset that they had to take time out of their busy day praising Hamas to call me a Nazi. Boom. The perfect answer on the perfect medium. How great is X? The world's greatest businessman, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, in their own words, instantly delivered to us. There was a time that the mainstream media could clip and frame Elon Musk as a Nazi, but no more. We can all see what he actually said on X and his reply. If you're taking your news from the legacy media, you are being misled. X is the media now. Helen Clark has a big audience with 226,000 followers. Elon Musk has a bigger one at just a smidge over 215 million. The New Zealand Herald and the New York Times are irrelevant. Now, I can't agree any more with that. The New Zealand Herald and the New York Times are most truly irrelevant unless I'm taking the piss out of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's I really do like Rodney Hyde's writing. There are some issues that there's some of the things he said in that article that I certainly wouldn't agree with, but that's more just sort of a matter of opinion. But he's pretty much on the button. And what's going to be really interesting with Uncle Helen over the next little while is that he's going to be integral to the leftist plan to rehabilitate the reputation of Jacinda Ardern. There's this hagiographical movie that has come out at Sundance. There's the taxpayer-funded movie. There's the ghost-written book. All of this sort of stuff. Like, the leftists are just going to go on and on and on about Ardern looking to rehabilitate her reputation. Then there will be efforts from NGOs. This happened with Tony Blair. You remember Tony Blair, who probably, other than George Bush, is the single person alive responsible for the deaths of more children than any other person on the planet, received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Save the Children. Now, what had happened was that there were ex-Labour cabinet members from his cabinet who were on the board in Great Britain, and they used their influence to ensure that there was this gala party that was attended in New York at the New York Met by the great and the good. I think it was something like $10,000 per plate, $100,000 per table, to go and see Tony Blair receive a Lifetime Achievement Award, and this was just to rehabilitate his reputation. On a smaller scale, that is what all of the leftists are going to do for Jacinda Ardern, and Helen Clark is a big part of that.
Yeah, and am I mistaken, or did Jacinda work for Tony Blair?
She worked in his office. She was a research assistant. So this is what you get with the left-wing parties. They all kind of like work in tandem with each other. It's all part of the Fourth International, right? And Trotskyism. Like when in the 1930s, when you had the Comintern around Stalin, and then you had the Trotskyites with the Fourth International looking to internationalize socialism, that's when all of the far left parties around the world started collaborating with one another. And you see this, like the cooperation between the left-wing parties, Labour and New Zealand. A good example is like Labour in New Zealand wants to groom a Jacinda Ardern, so she goes and does a couple of years as as a researcher in Tony Blair's office. Similarly, Darren Hughes, there's a teenage naked boy running terrified from the streets, through the streets of Wellington at 3 o'clock in the morning to get away from Darren Hughes. He needs a new job. There's a left-wing aligned NGO in Great Britain that via the Labour Party is provided to him for a soft landing. Similarly with Paul Hunt. Paul Hunt was the Human Rights Commissioner before Stephen Rainbow. He's a far-left extremist who was associated with Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party in Great Britain. He needed to get out of Great Britain because he had blotted his copybook. Jacinda Ardern ensures that he has a nice soft landing as New Zealand's Human Rights Commissioner. This is all coordinated. It's just how leftists operate around the world. But I see we've got a whole bunch of our friends coming, and we should probably say hello to a few people. You got some of your mates there in the chat?
We've got Phil here. Joel's popped his head, and I think he's popped his head on over on your end as well. So that's, yeah. Hello to Joel and Phil, of course.
Well, yeah, I can see them too here. And I see Adnan's here as well. Adnan Belushi, guys, he's been doing a whole bunch of really interesting long-form interviews. And I saw that he's published one with Paul Moon the other day, the historian Paul Moon. I thought that would be fascinating. So it's good to see Adnan here, and it's and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of that stuff, guys. If you're not following Adnan on X, that would be pretty. He's worth doing for that, some of that kind of long form interviews. And I also see that Shelley is here, which is fantastic. Maverick Kiwi, good evening. Concerned Citizen PLJ is here, fantastic. Matua is here. Good to see you. Oh, mate, Phil was here as well. And Angela Marino. Hello, Angela Marino on YouTube. Okay, guys, look, it's probably time for my article, unless you had some more to say about that thing with Uncle Helen.
Oh, well, just a quick hi to Warren Martin, who just popped his head in the chat as well. And also, very quickly, I wanted to raise this because it came up in conversation like yesterday or the day before, and it was just about how chummy, for example, young National and young Labour are. And it kind of pisses me off. I'm like, okay, you guys you're supposed to be very ideologically conflicting in many ways, except you almost, they tend to gang up against people who hold kind of more conservative views, or they tend to gang up on people that have anything that you'd probably associate with the National Party, maybe the National Party of a few decades ago, not the National Party of today. And it concerns me that they're basically the exact same thing. People like to say, oh yeah, they're two birds of the two wings of the same bird and whatever, and that I've more or less accepted at this point. But it's that much more obvious when you look at how their youth wings get along, and it kind of goes into the fact that you've got young Nats and young Labour literally going over either to the UK or Australia and helping out the Labour Party. You've got young Nats literally wearing Labour Party stickers for foreign elections where Labour Party is up for election, and I've seen people who have worked in the as interns for the likes of Chris Pink wearing Labour Party stickers, and I'm sitting, what is this joke? I mean, we can't seriously, if you're unaware, we can't seriously rely on National in the future as any form of centre-right option when the up-and-comers within the party are literally putting Labour Party stickers on their chests. When Keir Starmer's up for election or when Anthony Albanese's up for election. It's utterly nonsensical. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And while I think that it is, it's reasonable to expect that there can be collaboration and cooperation across the aisle, I don't think in modern times that scope is there. That the discourse is just now too polarized. And if young National MPs are hanging out with young Labour MPs, God, those kids need to get better friends. All right. Well, on that note, probably come over to my next article. I hope this works, guys, because I might have just put the wrong window up. Yeah, no, it does. Okay, for those who don't know, what I've been looking to do is to do a little bit more sort of considered and polished content, and a little bit sort of more long form, and sort of separating it out from kind of the live stuff that I do, which is a bit more sort of relaxed, and I make heaps of mistakes with Simon TV. and the live stuff, of course, that I do with young Eeryk here. So what I've been doing is doing pre-recorded interviews with a bunch of different people, and I'm releasing it on Polity World. Now, Polity World is my new blogging platform, and it's looking to separate into that kind of more serious type content, publishing articles and things like that, but also sort of separating a little bit from me as a person. So what I'm looking to do is to add contributors, people who want to write articles, and people who want to appear on podcasts and bits and pieces like that, okay? And so far, I've done 3 of them. They're all available on the polity.world website. That's the URL, polity.world. So just to go, it's free to subscribe to this, and I'm putting exclusive content up here. You don't have to pay to view it, but you do need to visit the Polity World website to view it. So the ones that I've done so far, I did this one, which was pretty good. I recorded this last week with Dr. James Kierstead. He's a classicist, which is fantastic. The guy, he speaks a bunch of different languages, speaks French, speaks ancient Greek, I think, as well. But he's, and I love the classics, and he's particularly well informed on it. But he's someone who got cancelled. He was a classicist teaching at Victoria University and got very much cancelled for holding conservative views, and is now at the New Zealand Initiative. Now, I had a really fascinating discussion with that guy from the inside about what is happening at our higher institutions of learning, and it was fascinating to get his view on that kind of stuff, which was just fantastic to do. Now, the next one I did, and this one was a little bit more sort of pandemonium, was a fantastic discussion with Elliot Ikalay and Cam Slater. Now, I really wanted to talk to Elliot about his submission on behalf of Hobson's Pledge with Thomas Newman last week, which was just, I don't know if you guys watched that, it's on the Parliament website, but it was a really, really good oral presentation on the Treaty Principles Bill from both Elliot and from young Thomas. So Elliot came along, talked to Cam and I about that, and then the 3 of us had a sort of a general discussion about what is happening with the National Party in particular, Go Away Mosquito, and how the tide of human affairs is moving away from wokery and towards, the pendulum is swinging away from that type of stuff. However, it seems that New Zealand, and particularly the National Party, is just is continuing with it. Everything from the climate stuff through to the DEI stuff, through to the apartheid stuff, all that sort of thing. It's like National is completely missing the notification from the world that the world isn't doing that anymore, and from the New Zealand people who are saying that is not what we elected you to do. So if you're interested in those sorts of topics, it's worth having a listen to that one. Now, the third and final one that I released was a really fascinating discussion with 2 people who very much know what they're talking about. That was Jill Ovens. Jill Ovens is the leader or co-leader of the Women's Rights Party. She's very much a traditionally a left-wing person. She comes from a trade union background, lifetime Labour member, all that sort of thing. But she saw the light around the gender issues and realised that the leftists and particularly the Labour Party was just troon central. They were all about ensuring that rainbow people could beat the pulp out of women in Albert Park, and Chris Hipkins would cheer for it. And that drove people like her out of the left, out of the trade union movement, out of the Labour Party into the Women's Rights Party. So I had a fascinating discussion with her and the prolific Katrina Biggs. Katrina Biggs is a social commentator. She writes a bunch of fascinating articles. She's just absolutely fantastic. So I had a really good discussion with those 2 ladies in December, which was the first one that I released. But I'm intending to do a bunch of this stuff, right? The idea is that with Polity World, I'm going to invite interesting people to talk to me and whoever else is interested in participating about interesting subjects. All right. So that's kind of like, that's the sort of the Big Simon initiative for 2025, looking to attract contributors, other writers, people who want to appear or contribute or what have you, and build something which is kind of a little bit more sort of separate from the bits and pieces that I do day-to-day live, like Simon TV and the Eeryk and Simon Show. So that's what I'm up to.
Very cool. I've been a little bit slack, honestly, and getting around to watching all of it, or at least a good amount of it, and taking note of all the effort you're putting in. But that one with Elliot in particular does pique my interest. I was just listening to Elliot before this, actually, talking with Joe Trinder, and boy, Elliot's so good to listen to. Met him on one occasion, so yeah, certainly got to get around to it. I really liked what you've done with it, especially you showing off all of the bits and bobs he had to make and all the time and effort that goes into that. I know I've got a lot of work to do on that front this coming week. So, yeah, very
All right.
good.
Well, I'm more than happy to give you a hand. All right. Look, some comments in the chat. Phil says young Nats and Labour are very matey. Yeah, that's not good. As Eeryk says, Joel says Chris Luxon is going to push for an idea for Kiwis to embrace global patriotism and implement powdered protein and Molenbeek bread. Really, Joel? Okay. And Adnan's enjoying policy. Oh, that's good to hear, Adnan. Yeah, Adnan, it'd be good to get you on sometime. I know what you're doing with the long form interviews and in-person stuff's a bit different, but it would be good to get you on to have a chat. PLJ says, would the projecting psychopath liars give the same answer statements in a court setting? PLJ, not sure who you're talking about. Phil says, awesome, you've been flat tax, Simon, good on you. Yeah, I've been doing a whole bunch of stuff, and Phil, not always successfully. Shelley the Kiwi says, left, right and centre, they all point in one direction. Woke. Shelley, you are just such an insightful lady. I love you. And Adnan says, get me on. Yep. Oh, good. That's fantastic. And PLJ says, Elon's teaching us it's okay to ridicule the toxically woke. I absolutely agree. You got some people you want to talk to in your chat there, young fella?
Yeah, very cool. Just from Robert, he says, National is socialism light and the Greens are socialism dope.
All right. Well, I put up.
Dopey.
They are, but on X, I put together one of those compass maps of where Chris Luxon fits in against all of the rest of the parties. I thought that was pretty funny. Okay, I'm going to excuse myself for a moment, but I think it's probably time for your next article, young fella, and you're going to talk to us about. Oh, okay. It's something nice and cheery. So we've got Eeryk talking to us about hospitals mutilating children.
Yep, as Simon promised, nice and cheery. Now, this comes from the Daily Wire by Mary Margaret Olahan. Basically, it's hospitals across the US stop transitioning children after Trump signs order protecting kids. Wouldn't it be lovely if we could have, I don't know, a leader who decided, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to do something about the issues we're dealing with, and then as you'd expect when you say we're doing something, the results come. And that's exactly what Trump here is doing. The results are coming. Following President Donald Trump's executive order protecting children from irreversible gender procedures, hospitals across the country have started cancelling appointments or ceasing their transgender programs for children. It's already having its intended effect, preventing children from being maimed and sterilised by adults perpetuating radical, false claim that they can somehow change a child's sex. The White House said in a Monday release, hospitals around the country are taking action to downsize or eliminate their so-called gender-affirming care programs. President Trump will always protect American children, the White House added. Promises made, promises kept again. In New York, the NYU Health began cancelling transgender appointments for children, including two 12-year-olds who were supposed to start puberty blockers, medication that can have irreversible impacts on a child's development. In Colorado, a spokesperson for Denver Health told NBC that it had stopped performing transgender surgeries on children and young people under the age of 19. Under the age of 19. Crazy. In Virginia, both VCU Health and the Children's Hospital of Richmond confirmed to NBC that they had halted their transgender medication and surgeries on children and people under 19. UVA Health in Charlottesville has suspended also called gender affirming care while it reviews the guidelines. What I find interesting here actually is they will repeatedly say we're going to stop performing transgender surgeries on children and young people under the age of 19 because they're trying to ensure that they can argue, well, technically we're not doing any surgeries on people under 18, so that's why we've said 19, because we were doing the surgeries on 18-year-olds. Now we're going to stop that and only do it for 19 and over. But what we'll find if we really dig deep enough is that they are offering surgeries to people under 18, and that's why they're specifically saying under the age of 19 to try and detract. They've been deliberately mutilating children. And so I think that's worth pointing out, because that's the most bizarre thing. You never hear under the age of 19. That's just bizarre. Um, like many health systems across the country, the University of Virginia and UVA Health are working to analyse and interpret the federal order and related state guidance, as well as monitoring other potential policy changes and impacts to ensure we are always delivering care in accordance with the law. In other words, they're going to do everything they possibly can to find a loophole to keep mutilating children, if it's the last thing they do. So yeah, that's the. There's a little bit at the end I want to go over, but first. That's the crux of everything that's happened. A simple executive order, and all of a sudden, the mutilation of children throughout the US has come to a grinding halt. And I mean, is that really too much to ask of our own people here in New Zealand? Just okay, look at what powers are available to you. Lay down some expectations about treatment, and expect the public sector to come through and implement that. I don't see why that's so hard, but we seem to be kind of pushing that back down the road as much as we can. I mean, NZ First attempted to do things in the area of sports, and then Chris Bishop wasn't having that, so he had to fiddle around with it and come to some kind of meat compromise, which isn't exactly clear if it's going to get the desired result of women being entirely removed from having to do sports with men and so forth. And Phil points out it's because of the age of consent differs by state, and that's a problem, don't you think? If the age of consent for chopping your tits off, it differs by state. I think any state that says that that's a normal thing to do should firstly have serious questions asked about their health practitioners and whether or not they should be in that position at all, particularly those that are there making the policy, health policy. What do you reckon, Simon?
Yeah, well, I think you're right to draw the fact that once again New Zealand is the outlier, right? Like, this week Queensland announced an outright ban on puberty blockers for children, bringing them into line with most of the rest of the world, and it sparked a debate at federal level in Australia, like Britain. They banned puberty blockers for under 18s, and all of this pruning of children, which is, let's face it, it's just mutilation. 6 months ago. Everyone is falling into line. The United States is doing it, mandating it, as you say, which is right and proper. New Zealand is dragging the train, and that is for a couple of reasons. One is that the responsible minister has been Chris Bishop when it comes to women's sport, and he is woke. Then you have Matt Ducey, who is the minister of responsible for mental health, who is ex-Tavistock Clinic. Now, the Tavistock Clinic, for those who don't know, in Great Britain, is to gender medicine what Auschwitz is to race relations. It is an absolute abattoir it just absolutely mutilated children. That was just their standard approach. Our minister responsible for mental health used to work there. And for some reason, by sheer coincidence, New Zealand is the one country in the Anglosphere that is not addressing troonery and gender mutilation of children. It is wrong, and of course, if we didn't have a national government, it would have been solved by now. I've got to tell you, this is just another example of why National and Chris Luxon and all of his little woke tards in cabinet just need to be absolutely voted out of office at the next election.
Yeah, I do remember before the election, and even quite recently, I've sat there and I've thought, ACT are pretty socially progressive, but to be completely fair, they are quite rational on this issue by comparison to National. I would say if it was a ACT or an NZ First led government, this issue would have been put to bed. There would be no more, guys running around beating up girls in rugby. There would be, no confusion about how many genders there are, and we wouldn't be giving puberty blockers to 12-year-olds who think that they're a cat. So, yeah. It's I've probably been a bit harsh on ACT in that respect, and to think that somehow National are the primary issue across the board. And actually, I was noting that it does appear that New Zealanders agree that national is the primary issue with the government, given they're the only party in the coalition that has less support now than they did 18 months ago. So there is that. But to continue, I just had this one part down towards the bottom, and it's more or less, it starts with, across the country today, medical professionals are maiming and sterilizing a growing number of impressionable children under the radical and false claim that adults can change a child's sex through a series of irreversible medical conditions. The order states, this dangerous trend will be a stain on our nation's history and it must end. Countless children soon regret that they have been mutilated and begin to grasp the horrifying tragedy that they will never be able to conceive children of their own or nurture their children through breastfeeding. The order continues, moreover, these vulnerable youths' medical bills have risen throughout their lifetimes as they are often trapped with lifelong medical complications, a losing war with their own bodies, and tragically sterilization. Now, we can bring that back to the whole Matt Ducey issue and just how bizarre it is that he's in that position as the Minister for Mental Health. Is if you outline and you look at it objectively, what this all does is that they believe in gender transition on the basis that, one, you can be a different gender and actually transition, but two, that will somehow make your mental health better. That is the solution. If you've got gender dysphoria, or what I would like to call the gender indoctrination, of the not being confident in yourself or liking who you are, and so you create a false personality and identity to try and cope with everything you're going through, otherwise known as childhood. The way to deal with that is to firstly go on puberty blockers until you figure out what you want, and by that point you're a very androgynous, underdeveloped creature that we can't really put a proper label on, until you eventually start chopping body parts off and mutilating yourself, to levels that you really just don't even want to think about. I mean, I think the photos that we always see on X probably give everyone an idea of what we're going on about there. But it discusses how it's a lifelong consequence. The consequences are lifelong that come from it. The medical complications from the surgeries alone, the lack of ability to actually breastfeed children, or even have children, all of it is a lifelong tax on your life, like the quality of life, and it's only going to make your mental health worse. There is no logical situation. There is no outcome from any of this treatment which results in better long-term mental health. So you cannot argue for a second that this should be done because it improves mental health in the long term. They might delude themselves into thinking that in the short term it makes them feel better, but in the long term it'll only ever end up with them either dead from complications or dead because they can't deal with the complications. So yeah, that's all I have to say on it.
Okay, yeah. Like the thing that really strikes me is just how easy it is for this change to be introduced in the United States, right? As Adnan says in the chat, he says, New Zealand culture is not set to push things like Americans. You need to become a Republican before courage is expressed to stop crazy ideas. And there's some truth in that, right? Like, why does it take Eeryk Stanford 18 months to introduce a really minor change to the RSE education in schools? Why wasn't it not on first day? No, we are not having blue-haired teachers groom children anymore. Why is it that Chris Bishop couldn't say to Raylene Castle at Sports New Zealand, okay, if you've got men playing in women's sports, we are not going to give you any money for those sports? Why couldn't that happen on day one? There's this malaise in New Zealand culture that allows this stuff to just continue. And with National, they come in and they don't actually fix things, right? New Zealanders don't want DEI, right? What happens? A lesbian sinks a $170 million boat because she can't find the autopilot switch to turn it off. What happens? She doesn't lose her job, right? She has the minister herself, Judith Collins, going on national television berating anyone who points out the fact that that woman was incompetent and sunk one of our boats because she was not good at her job and was appointed to the position for her for the single reason of her gender and her sexuality. Things don't change, right? What we wouldn't give to have a Malay in New Zealand, or even, God forbid, a Trump, someone who just comes in and says, no, we're not doing that anymore. Stop, this is gone, we're going, right? We're not seeing that. We're not seeing that from National. They're not changing things. They are not the antidote to that malaise and to Adernism. What they are is the continuation of it. And that other bad thing about National is that they share Labour's ideology, but they're better at actually implementing it. All right. Got any comments from your people you wanted to address?
No, we're good. Phil's added a couple bits and bobs, but it's more or less along the lines of let them decide as adults, leave the kids alone. And I agree. So,
Yeah, I agree too. All right. Well, look, New Zealand is very much out of step when it comes to a bunch of this stuff, and the world knows it, right? Like, it's not going to take long for the world to realize, oh, look, I'm a British citizen. I want to troon my 15-year-old kid. I can't do that in Britain. All I have to do is go on holiday to New Zealand, which has reciprocal healthcare relationships. If you're a New Zealander in Great Britain, you get free healthcare from the NHS. If you're a Brit in New Zealand, you get free healthcare from the New Zealand taxpayer. We reciprocate like that. British parents who want to troon their kids are going to work out very, very rapidly that all it takes is for them to come here on holiday, and they can get the operations and they can get the puberty blockers. And the reason is that we've got Chris Luxon as a Prime Minister and Matt Ducey as the Minister of Mental Health. These people are enabling all of that nonsense.
Yeah, perhaps that's the National Party tourism strategy. Maybe we just didn't
medical
realise
tourism. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. All right, guys. It's probably my turn for an article. This was speaking about the inability of our coalition government to actually achieve anything. Have a look at this, you guys. You might have seen it during the week. This was about Janet Dixon. She's the real estate agent. Now, the problem you have in New Zealand is that there's a real estate licensing authority which has via an act of Parliament the authority to license real estate agents and say who can operate as a real estate agent and who can't. And they get to mandate things like education. So, okay, in order to be a real estate agent, you have to do this, that, and the other thing. One of the things that they mandated, because they are woke, is that people who work as real estate agents needed to know about a thing called tikanga. Tikanga is traditional Maori cultural knowledge. And they also needed to be indoctrinated into a left-wing view of what the Treaty of Waitangi is. All right, now, Janet Dixon is a woman who, as a real estate agent, said, look, this political ideology, firstly, I disagree with it. Secondly, it is utterly irrelevant to my job as a real estate agent. But they demanded that she complete that course anyway. And what's happened is that she took them to court and lost. How about that? A high court judge in this country said, no, it doesn't matter about your free speech. It doesn't matter about your freedom of association. It doesn't matter that you're a Christian lady. She's a Presbyterian and you have freedom of belief. You will be indoctrinated into our version of what the Treaty of Waitangi says and our interpretation of it, or you will lose your job and you will not be able to reapply for your job for 5 years. And that's what they did. A judge did that to a person. That Mrs. Dixon no longer works as a real estate agent. She has been denied her livelihood by this judge. This is an article that comes to us from Rick Stevens in the Aotearoa Herald. Janet Dixon, the real estate agent facing a 5-year ban for refusing to do a Maori tikanga course, has lost a court bid to block the threatened cancellation of her license. Today, the High Court turned down her request for a judicial review of decisions about agents' professional development requirements, which required her to take a 90-minute course called blah, blah, blah. And it goes on, but we've got a view here of the judge. And I think there was, yes, here it is. Justice McQueen said, to the contrary, the evidence demonstrates that the registrar applied the test for an exemption that was set by the authority in the practice rules and which has since been developed by case law. Dixon's legal team were approached with a question about whether she now planned to take the decision to the Court of Appeal. They said no decisions had yet been made on the next steps. And here we go. After the court decision was released, Associate Justice Minister Nicole McKee said that she did not consider that the Takano course met her expectation of being relevant to the real estate profession. It is critically important to me that the Real Estate Authority can demonstrate that its services materially improve outcomes for all New Zealanders and that they represent value for money. This case has shed light on an overly harsh punishment for real estate agents who have not completed the requirements, the professional development requirements. No profession imposes a 5-year disqualification period on individuals for failing to complete their CPD requirement. It is a disproportionate response that stops people from working in their chosen profession. Now, here's the thing. I quite like Nicole McKee, but she, as she has been saying on social media, and she said in the media today, she set an expectation with the Real Estate Licensing Authority that they would not proceed with this stuff and they would not mandate this extremist political indoctrination. She said that to the Real Estate Authority, and she's responsible for it. As Daiwa de Boer said to me, on social media, she could have actually solved this as the minister. She could have said to them, right, you as the real estate agent, you are all, every single one of you, Real Estate Authority, fucking fired. Gone. You are out. We are not paying for you anymore, because she gets to appoint these people. She could have said, right, you are imposing this nonsense upon people and impacting their livelihoods. Get out, you are sacked, and I'm going to appoint replacements who are actually going to uphold democratic norms in our country. She didn't do that. Instead, what she did is she gave them an indication that she was not happy, and then she paid their legal bills. Don't forget, when this woman, Mrs. Dixon, went into court, the lawyers that she was facing off again were completely taxpayer funded by Nicole McKee, by the Justice Department in this country. This woman has had to fight the state, has had to fight Nicole McKee, the Real Estate Authority, and the coalition government, and she lost. This woman no longer has a livelihood because Nicole McKee did not have the guts to actually do what was necessary and get rid of these people from the Real Estate Licensing Authority. This judge is woke. Nicole McKee is woke. The Real Estate Authority is woke. It is absolutely disastrous. The only solution is for everyday Kiwis to say, no, we're not going to do it. If you are a real estate agent, I am not selling my house via you. What I'm going to do instead is I am going to go and see a lawyer who is familiar with conveyance and get, because it's all templated, how do I sell my house? Go spend the money with a lawyer. They will tell you how to do it. I will advertise myself, places like Trade Me, what have you. I will ensure to follow all of the processes, and the advantage of doing that myself is that the conveyance lawyer is a lot cheaper and I don't have to pay a real estate agent. And any real estate agent who says, why are you doing this via private sale rather than using my services, say, it is because you are licensed by an apartheid institution, the Real Estate Licensing Authority, and me as a Kiwi who believes in democracy want nothing to do with you and your body. And until we as Kiwis start fighting back against this woke, it's not going to change, because as Nicole McKee has shown, our coalition government will not fix these problems for us. What do you reckon, Eeryk?
Wow, you got pretty fired up there, to be fair, Simon, and I don't blame you. But yeah, look, I mean, for me, if a member of parliament or a minister, whatever, has the power to get the results that they said they would bring, and they do not utilize said power to get the results, and as a result, the outcome is not what was expected, then they need to be held accountable for that. And in fact, if you're not willing to use the power that you have, then why have you been given the power at all? You don't deserve that power if you're not going to do it to do what you were elected to do.
I agree. I agree.
Nicole-
And Nicole McKee,
yeah.
I like her. I like her, but she has dropped the ball here. She's dropped the ball. But the other thing is she is the junior minister. It is Judith Collins who is justice. But, Nicole McKee has authority here over the Real Estate Licensing Authority. She could have fixed this, and she hasn't. All right. Now, Judith Collins, she's blotted her copybook as well. She's gone absolutely woke. She didn't get rid of Una Jagos when Una Jagos introduced apartheid to unilaterally, without a mandate, introduced apartheid into prosecution decisions. Judith Collins kept her around. But Nicole McKee, it's really on her. I would be interested if Judith Collins has told McKee that this is not going to happen. But if I was Nicole McKee, I would be saying, look, I wanted to get rid of this real estate authority. I couldn't do it because Judith Collins stopped me. Otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, this is on Nicole McKee.
Yeah, for me, I feel partly that maturing is realizing that the only portfolio Judith Collins is any good at is justice, because she's a hard ass bitch. Just say those words, and because I think about her, and all I can think of that's got any remote positivity or value that I've seen her actually do is crush some cars and the 3 strikes law. That's it. And I even asked her the question a few years ago at a meeting. What are National's plans with respect to the 3 strikes law? And she said, bring it back. And everyone stood up and clapped, and here we are, we're getting it back. But yeah, it's... What is she doing? I mean, I don't feel like there's anything good that we can say about what she's done in her portfolios this time around. I think people are pretty mixed on, genetic modification as well. So that doesn't reflect well. She's really big into, this technology advancement type roles in the last few years, and that kind of raised a lot of concerns for many people who are a little bit more cautious around those sorts of things. So, yeah, I'd say. Yeah, even the best of the best national MPs, or the most renowned national MPs that are still in Parliament, that they're not doing a particularly good job, are they? And so the fact that they can get overshadowed by first-time ministers like Nicole McKee and Karen Shaw and that sort of thing should be a wake-up call for them, because I think the average person does notice more than they think, and I think ACT in particular is starting to kind of watch social media to get a gauge of what they should be doing. I think New Zealand First doing the same thing at the moment, and that's why they've suddenly taken some very hardline positions on a couple issues, or maybe not quite hardline, but they're starting to speak up about a few things a bit more. But back to the actual topic at hand here, I think, yeah, the fact that it's completely irrelevant is the most egregious part of it all. It's one thing if it was inherently relevant to the position. You could still make the argument that it's not fair that you should be required to do a tikanga course to actually have the job. But the fact it has zero relevance at all to selling houses or whatever, it just makes this decision ridiculous. And for it to then be upheld by a high court of all things, it just adds insult to industry. And I think
it absolutely has. It's absolute political indoctrination. But sorry to interrupt you there. What I'll do is I'm going to bring up the next bit, because Cameron Slater did a bit on this. This is what I've got on screen is Cam Slater's post about Justice McQueen. Cam writes, the credentials of the judge who ruled Janet Dixon must complete a course on Maori culture, language and the treaty to retain her realtor's license. And here's the blurb. In 2016, Justice McQueen joined Te Aka Matua Oti Turi Law Commission as a commissioner, and in 2017 was appointed Tumu Wakarare Turaro Deputy President. She spent an 11-month period as acting president of Te Aka Matua Oti Turi Law Commission in 2019-2020. Dixon never stood a chance, writes Cam. Here's the front page of the Law Commission's website, and this is absolutely right. What we've got here is a judge who is not reflecting the interests of New Zealanders and New Zealanders and the opinion of the populace, who is not reflecting the laws as they are passed in New Zealand. What we have is another activist judge imposing tikanga laws upon New Zealand people, and we don't want it. with this is just it's beyond ridiculous that we have this stuff being promulgated on top of us. And I posted about this. Here's a picture of this particular judge, apparently, and I've been told that she's a patched member of the Labour Party. This is Judge McQueen, and she has certainly been indoctrinated into that sort of thing. What is it with these judges who believe that they can impose this stuff without the mandate on the people? Judges in New Zealand need to understand that they reflect our wishes. They enforce our laws. As soon as they stop doing that, they need to go. And this is why in this post I've been proposing, as I often do, the judges become elected positions so that we can get rid of them. When a wokester like this decides that to be a real estate agent, you need to be fully indoctrinated into far left race critical theory to do your job, she needs to go. There needs to be mechanisms within our society to say, no, you are gone. You do not get to work as a judge in our democracy any longer.
Yeah, I certainly feel like there's some merit to the whole electing judges, at least at a certain level, because I think the High Court and above, you could certainly get away, even maybe the Court of Appeal. There's some merit to actually electing them or having some form of way for the public to have a say in who gets those roles, because stuff like this is fundamentally important. And if their records is one of activism and not justice, then they should not be in a justice role. But you also mentioned the whole tikanga law type thing. And that's the interesting thing, is we have actual laws which tell us what the laws are, and the judge's role is to interpret a fair judgment based on what that says. But what this activist judge wants to do is say, no, we're going to ignore the actual law or the actual expectations set out for us, or at least what was the expectations set out by the government for the real estate agents authority to follow. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow tikanga law, which is very, very renowned for being extremely, a lot like the treaty principles in the sense that they are malleable, kind of can be made up on the spot, that they differ from place to place, from iwi to iwi, hapu to hapu, person to person. They're just a joke. Like it's just as this is no different to playing whale songs to trees, as far as I'm concerned. No different at all.
No, I agree. All right, young fella, we've been going for about an hour. I've got a few comments to catch up on. Twiggy is here. I haven't seen Twiggy for a little while. Nice to see you. And Debbie Lacey is here. Hello. She says hello to both of us. Good to see you, Debbie. And hey, Debbie, thank you for helping me work out that the commenting section and stuff and the email integration was working on Polity World. That was really helpful. Very much appreciate it. PLJ says mandatory harkers for all open homes. Yeah, it's just kind of like that, man. It's just ridiculous. Phil says imposing their own biases on others, which is exactly right, Phil, and we don't pay them to do that. Judges are there to represent the will of the people, not to impose their far left ideology upon us. Joel says having Maori words peppered into an email is one thing, but a mandatory tikanga course is obviously going to be divisive, and it's sad that when people are struggling to even have a fantasy about home ownership, there's resources allocated to this. Exactly right, Joel, and that's the thing. That's a very good point. Like, economically, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. This does nothing to alleviate that. Twiggy says most white judges are apartheid apologists. They absolutely are. Sue is here. Good to see you, Sue. I'm wondering if Sue, if you saw that review I did of the Jinhao 9019 Dardao the other day. I haven't heard back from you about it. Sue observes, the Nats have figured it's easier to sit on the fence than to step over it. We are not only in the recession, we are in deep apathy. Sue, that is exactly right. They are just managerial and technocratic. They largely share the views of the left and of the bureaucracy and of the judges, and they're just getting on and doing it. No one in New Zealand wants to have apartheid. Most New Zealanders want the Treaty Principles Bill to pass. Most New Zealanders want us to remove ourselves from the ridiculousness of climate Scientology and the Paris Accords. National aren't doing either. The reason is, as you say, they're technocratic, managerial, and left-wing, so they're just going to get on and do that despite what people, the Kiwi people, want. Joel says, my work has mandatory Treaty of Waitangi course that ran for 1 day, but it was an open discussion and not demoralising in the slightest. I'm glad to hear that, Joel, particularly given your line of work. Twiggy says, don't apologise or justify. We stood still, they moved left. It's standing where I always stood. That is exactly right. Okay, you got any of your people you need to talk to there, young fella?
I do, but very quickly, the whole idea, it's easier for National to sit on the fence. See, that would be true if they weren't losing support. And I think maybe a little bit too late. Maybe they will start realising that they need to start adopting some more hardline positions come the start or mid of next year, because obviously the election is next year. How scary is that? But yeah, I think it's not really safe for them to sit on the fence anymore, especially with NZ First and ACT kind of eating away, taking more hardline positions, getting rewarded for it, or at least at the very least National getting taking hits, and Labor being the benefactors. But I think Labor being the benefactors of National to some degree right now kind of makes them more inclined to sit in the middle. So ultimately, I think that's going to be their downfall. But I do have a couple points. One from, who was it? Phil. Andrew McKenzie says, many of the left are happy to do bad things and get paid for it. It just seems to be. The thing is, I don't know if they realise it's bad because they live in this delusional world where whatever they do, as long as it's consistent with their worldviews, it's inherently good. It's for the positive. So it's one of those things where you'd have to prove the intent. Are they intentionally doing something bad or knowingly doing it knowing it's bad? I would probably say no. Andrew also says, I think referring to that judge looking beautiful for the cameras like Ardern, because of course all of the left-wing activists and whatnot get all of the lovely puff pieces, even if, what was it? I think it was Stuff or another, maybe it was the spin-off. They're writing articles about themselves now. They like to say, oh, here's one of our contributors. Here's what a lovely life she's had, and what a great contributor she is to this. It's like, yeah, because no one cares. And Robert says Māori are the colonizer now. Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying they're the colonizer, but they're certainly getting more and more extreme. And I think that's quite clear with the suggestion that there should be some sort of Māori person to overrule the government or parliament decisions. Did I see that or hear that correctly in the last day or so?
Yeah, you did. So this is and this is this is an example of when they tell you who they are, believe them, right? Like what it is it's talking about effectively having a Maori king who's called a commissioner who can overrule Parliament, and of course that is anti-democratic, right? What is really fascinating about this is that Greens and Labour are on board with it. It's a ludicrous suggestion from the Maori Party, which should have, in a democracy, have instantly ruled them out of ever going into coalition with any other party. But of course, Chris Hipkins, because he is a far left extremist and a communist, and he sees in race apartheid, like he sees in climate, the opportunities to dismantle democracy and democratic institutions and imposed a far left extremist police state upon the New Zealand people, did not. Right? Chris Hipkins is on board with having a Maori supremacist commissioner over top of Parliament who can overrule the democratic decisions. That the Maori Party is saying that is a bottom line in their coalition agreements. Everyone in New Zealand should be laughing at them because it is absolutely ludicrous. Everyone in New Zealand probably is, except for the likes of Chloe Swarbrick and Marama Davidson of the Green Party, and of course Chris Hipkins of the Labour Party, because this is who they are. Essentially, the left is anti-democratic, and they will, if they get into office, accept this demand from the Maori Party.
What I find interesting about this is it could potentially, if people are properly informed about this, and it's we work extremely hard as alternative media, even ACT and New Zealand First doing the exact same thing, raising awareness, the likes of Hobson Pledge and the Free Speech Union even, because sometimes they dabble with stuff that's not directly related to free speech. And even the Taxpayers Union, because it would be a taxpayer-funded role, no doubt. If we start raising more and more and more awareness about this, you could get to a situation where 12, 18 months from now, the political landscape is extremely different. We could have, well, Te Pāti Māori probably isn't going to look much different in terms of size. They could potentially be 5 or 6%. But the Greens and Labour could either take a dramatic hit or maybe stay about the same. But we could see a dramatic change in where everything sits on the right. And if I would personally, I feel like I've got enough faith in swing voters that we could see them just abandon Labour if they took this bizarre route of accepting some form of supremacist ruler who's effectively a dictator, to be completely blunt, because they can just overrule anything Parliament decides. So effectively a dictator in terms of our laws. If I could see them drop to like the default base vote, which is 20% at best, and then you've suddenly got this really weird kind of mess on the right that you'd divvy up all of these votes to, and you'd feel like, given the nature of this issue, that ACT and New Zealand First be the dramatic benefactors there. Now that's the best case scenario, but I would love to see that.
Yeah, I can't because what the effect of this is that it moves the Overton window, right? Like, eventually what will happen is, what could happen is someone like Chris Hipkins could say, oh, okay, we're going to go into coalition with the Maori Party, but yes, we've agreed with them that no, we are not going to have a commissioner who can overrule Parliament, but in order to achieve that, we've agreed to hand over water assets to co-governance. We've agreed to ensure that there are unelected Maori at Maori Corporation iwi representatives on every government board, all this sort of stuff, right? And it's all about shifting that Overton window and introducing that far left police state that Labour so desperately wants to implement. And this is the issue is that because National is not the antidote to any of that sort of stuff, as you're saying, it's really disappointing that a bunch of the people who are fleeing, there are so many refugees from National, they have burned so many bridges. People I know who are lifelong National voters are never going to vote for them again because of Chris Luxon. They just can't believe what National has done. But it is astonishing the number of people who are even considering Labour. After 6 years of what they did to this country, they devastated our economy. They ruined our society. In 6 short years, our democracy and our first world status are teetering on the edge, and yet people still are, National are so bad, people are still now considering voting for Labour, and that is a very, very sorry outcome. And what it means is that people need, National, rather ACT and New Zealand First need to be capturing those refugees, and the way to do it, as you said earlier, is by representing the people's opinions. All right, as you're seeing David Seymour doing, saying, okay, we are listening, we are considering pulling out of the Paris Accords. All right, mate, look, we've been going for about an hour, and I see we've got a whole bunch of different articles to go on with. I think you've got a piece for us next. Is that you?
Yeah,
on
about sanctions.
Oh, about sanctions. Okay, let me pull that up for you. Hold on. Go ahead, mate.
Sweet. So this is on the Otago Daily Times. Just trying to figure out who wrote it. Very quick. I'm not entirely sure. But
Angus Drever.
Oh, yeah,
he's the photographer.
That's the photo. Yeah. Well, thank you, Angus Drever, for the photo. Louise Upston looking like Louise Upston. But yeah. So this is kind of a little bit close to home because it's related to sanctions on beneficiaries, and I've admittedly been the benefactor of that for a while. Unfortunately just lost my job the last couple of weeks, so that doesn't help either, but that's why I thought it was important to talk about, because I can speak firsthand on what I think about these changes to the benefits and the expectations and whatnot, whether there's really any merit to be complaining about any of the changes, which for some reason people seem to think there is. So start saying the government is introducing new sanctions for those on benefits, including taking 5-hour weekly training courses. The announcement also said job seekers would need to perform a minimum of 3 job search activities every week for a month and report back to the Ministry of Social Development. The new sanctions would ensure there was accountability in the welfare system, Social Development Employment Minister Louise Upston said. It's important beneficiaries who can work are taking steps to re-enter the workforce. Consequences must exist for those who don't. The new sanctions are part of the government's beneficiary traffic light system. The system applies to people who receive a benefit with work or social obligations, such as job seeker support. They are given a green, orange, or red status. Once someone is moved to red, they are sanctioned. Those sanctioned will have to provide evidence of their activities at the end of their sanction to return to green in the system. Craig Rennie, policy director at the Council of Trade Unions, said there needed to be more evidence that these sort of sanctions had an effect. Is there evidence that these have worked elsewhere? If they were doing this when unemployment was falling and there were lots of jobs, you can sort of go, okay, I see why. How do we encourage people into jobs? But when unemployment is rising and there are fewer and fewer roles, it looks a lot like just demonizing people who are doing their best. Ricardo Menendez March, the Green Party MP, said it was another punitive measure that would push beneficiaries deeper into hardship. They should be supported to find work in a way that matches their skills and aspirations with adequate work, rather than pushing people into any job, no matter how unsuitable for the person. He said it was concerning that these sanctions were being added to the bill at this stage. This means oral and written submitters didn't have that information at the time of making submissions. We had a very high level of written submissions, and the bill meant we actually weren't able to accommodate all the results of oral submissions as a result of it. It feels like bad democratic process to slap these extra sanctions halfway through when they knew they wanted to do it from the beginning. They could have delayed the bill until all of its components were clear and ready. Now, to be fair, this is one thing that I slightly agree with Ricardo on, the idea that we make amendments that are relatively dramatic after the select committee stage, although sometimes those sorts of changes are in response to actual submissions, which is part of the point of the select committee stage. So whether or not there's merit to what he's saying here, or these are either pre-planned or in direct response to some of the submissions, I suppose, I don't know, but either way, it's probably the only point he's made here that has any validity at all. What I do find funny is the idea that this kind of measure will put beneficiaries deeper into hardship. There is no possible way for a work-ready individual, someone who's able to go out and fulfill a job, will be put into deeper hardship by having to apply for 3 jobs a week and maybe doing a training course, which is the only thing there which I think it shouldn't be mandatory, because there are people who simply have no need of training courses, unless they're trying to get into a completely different industry they've never had any involvement with, in which case it should be offered, or provided as an opportunity. If that's part of the strategy that you're having with your case manager, for example. So, that should be available. It should not be a mandatory thing, in my opinion. But the idea of you having to put through 3 job applications a week for a month, I mean, that's just the bare minimum that you should be doing if you're looking for work and you're receiving that benefit. So the idea that that's going to put you deeper into hardship is ridiculous, and this is what the left don't seem to get. All of the criticisms of this change are it will make the lives of beneficiaries harder, those beneficiaries on a job seeker benefit, that is. It's too hard because there's not enough jobs available. And that goes into Craig Rennie from the Council of Trade Unions saying that it would make sense if there were lots and lots of available jobs and unemployment was falling and all of that. But it's like, it literally makes no difference how many jobs are available. As long as you're applying for jobs, you don't get sanctioned. It really isn't that complicated. So apply for 3 jobs a month, even if you're not going to get them. Hell, apply for jobs you can't get if you're going to be that much of a grifting prick. Apply for jobs you can't even get and say, hey, look, I applied for 3 jobs. Boom, they're off your back. You took half an hour to apply for 3 jobs, and that's you for the week. Well done. You've just earned your week's worth of taxpayer money. It's not a big ask, and frankly, I don't see why anyone could possibly oppose this bill. And so I would certainly be standing up there being as a beneficiary saying, "Hey, look, I'm more than happy. I'm more than happy for you to make those sanctions even harsher." What are your thoughts, Simon?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and we have a real problem in this country that for many, many people, welfare has just become a lifestyle choice. And you hear about people that are third or fourth generation unemployed and things like that. And you think, the problem is it becomes a poverty trap, and that people are stuck in. And there are political forces like the Greens and Labour and Tinkerbell. There is certainly a part of that who see locking people into poverty and state dependence as a method of ensuring that they always have their electoral support, right? Because they become mummy and daddy, and it's a circumstance of govern me harder, right? If you want your benefits to be increased, if you don't want to have sanctions, if you just want to scrape by a little bit more and never have to find a job, then Labour and the Greens are the party for you. I think that there's a solid libertarian argument to move away from any sort of state support like that. That moving all of that sort of thing into the charitable sector, where because things like our churches, for example, some of them have centuries of practice at running social services, and they seem to do a very, very good job at it. I'm not sure that the state is well placed. I like the idea of having a welfare system as a safety net for people that do fall on hard times, particularly people where it's no fault of their own. It's through accident, or it's through a health condition, or people who've lost a partner, they've been widowed, that sort of stuff. It is fully understandable that there is some sort of state support. However, in New Zealand, it doesn't work like that. What we have is lifetime support, right? It is the fact that New Zealand is the only country in the world where gang members are fully taxpayer funded, right? Almost 100% of gang members in this country live in state housing and receive social welfare benefits in the terms of payments for unemployment benefit, and their partners receive domestic purposes benefit. New Zealand gangs are almost entirely taxpayer funded. Free housing, free money, free everything, courtesy of the taxpayer. And then their criminal operations on top of it. And that's when you hear of examples like that, it really does turn people off when they've got to go to work. A lot of people don't really enjoy their jobs. They've got better things to be doing with their time, spending times with their wives and husbands, spending time with their children, doing all that sort of stuff. But instead they go to work, they work a job that they don't really like. And what's happening with their taxpayer funds that they are overtaxed for every week? It's going to pay dirtbags like that, and that makes a lot of people pretty angry.
Yeah, and I think there's to some degree we just kind of need to take a hardline approach on that. And I think we've got a little bit too comfortable and scared of anything different or any kind of different strategy, one of less reliance. But sometimes you do just need to take a hardline approach on things like gang members. I feel like if you're a gang member, you should have your household automatically excluded from state housing. You should be excluded, or at least given a vastly reduced rate for any form of benefit, because you're literally involving yourself in criminal organizations which destroy the communities which you're a part of. And then, like you're talking about, it is very much just a welfare for life type situation here in New Zealand these days. And I just recently had a neighbour that left who they very much match that. They were what you would expect a beneficiary family who have kids to get more money. They were there 4 months, completely trashed the house, and now the owners have been spending the last few weeks completely refurbing the house, because that's how they treat it. They were connected to gangs. They didn't really look after the place. They were surprisingly good neighbours compared to what you'd expect, but they destroyed the place. It smelled like piss. Pretty much half the walls in the house needed to be completely refitted. That's the average life of the lifelong welfare grifters, and something needs to be done. And I think sanctions alone aren't going to do that. And when you consider that it is pretty much every gang member is getting this sort of help, that's a good place to start. And so we probably should start there. And I've got a couple of comments, and Andrew says it's a real journey from living at home in your bedroom to an actual job. But it is all about being kind, and that's why we don't seem to do anything about it. It's what he's described as toxic empathy, and I think there's some real truth to that. And even Joel more or less double down that, saying it's the compassionate thing to do. It's the compassionate thing to do to give these people that have no real regard for our community at all, no intention to contribute, to give them money.
Yeah, it doesn't really work, right? Yeah, all right. Well, there's a few comments I wanted to come through on the chat. Joel says there's a sizable growing Indian community that will be National's ticket to securing lost voters. Yeah, I don't know, Joel. Like a bunch of the Indian people that I speak to are pretty unimpressed. Like they really do not like things like welfare and violent crime. They're really down on that, and if they don't see National, my perception of those communities is if they don't see National addressing this type of stuff, they will flee elsewhere. Like particularly with the Indian. Well, I shouldn't really say Indian. I mean more people from Southern Asia. So that's people who are of Indian extraction, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, all that sort of stuff, right? Like a lot of those people in those communities are often small retailers. And things like, family operated corner shops and things like that. And, ram raids are a thing in their community and they want to see that solved. So I'm not sure how much of the Indian vote is bolted on for National while they are soft on crime. PLJ says, wait for another month for the Trump effect. They're multiplying difference another 2 years. PLJ, yeah, I talked about this with the lads about American cultural imperialism and the hope that some of this Trump anti-DEI, anti-wokery permeates out into the rest of the West. But the point that I'm making is that the rest of the West seems to be getting on board with that stuff, except New Zealand, because National stands in the way of it. National is a left-wing party. They are not likely to want to do what Trump and all of us want to do. Sue says, when the electorate sees no change, they become even more politically apathetic. Is that right? I hear a lot of angry voices, Sue. I think one of the real problems that New Zealand faces right now is the potential for conflict, for actual confrontation, riots, demonstrations, and worse from a very, very unhappy population that just sees all of this stuff happening and says that our government is not fixing it. If we want it fixed, we are going to fix it ourselves. And that is something that the national government would be wise to avoid. Debbie says, just to let you know that you are so loved and treasured. I think that is meant for you, Eeryk, because me, I'm horrible. Twiggy says, quite enjoying the Trump effect today. Yep, good for you. Not on a watch list says, the most important thing about moving from people from out of long-term unemployment is further training. Not a watch list. Yeah, I think that's right. The long-term unemployed, like some of those people, it's just terrible. And a lot of it is, is depression and misery and mental health. And yeah, I think it is worthwhile investing time with those people, and that is one of the things that that private charities are very, very good at is that kind of emotional support, at least from what I have seen. Twiggy, the victim, press 1 if you're over it. Yeah, absolutely. Phil says, remember, Eeryk, you live in a city. Most of the country is sparsely populated. Phil, that's exactly right. New Zealand is actually, in terms of landmass, larger than the United Kingdom, quite like 10-15% larger, and with 1/20th of the population. Eeryk, you got any of your people who you wanted to talk about?
No, we're good. They've already said their piece.
Okay, all right. We've got less than 45 minutes to go. Oh, Shelley the Kiwi says, just helped moved an elderly lady into community housing, an 8-unit block, and she's the only one not related to the rest of the tenants, all from one family. Shelley, yeah, that's unbelievable, right? Like, just astonishing. Like, that is just absolute state dependence. And, that's not good. That is not good for anyone in that family to be involved in. When you've got a whole, extended family of people and no one has a job, no one is used to, being a productive member of society, you get a sort of a social contagion effect. Yeah, it's which is really, really depressing. One would hope that there would be community groups or something that could resolve that, because God knows, the Ministry of Social Development won't. All right, the next article I have for you is coming back to our corrupt judiciary. Now, the thing is with our judiciary, they are utterly corrupt. We have Una Jagos universally, without a mandate, unilaterally, I should say, introducing racist prosecution guidelines. Nothing happens to her. We have Golriz Garriman showing up into court, and the judge, who is awfully, awfully kind to her, is actually one of her friends. The judge doesn't recuse herself from the case. What she does is she sits there smiling, knowing no one can do anything about the fact that she is corruptly adjudicating one of her friends in a court case. What you find with all of these judges is there is no consequences. They are activists introducing their ideas, imposing them upon the rest of us, and finding every reason under the sun not to find one another accountable when they behave corruptly or they make a mistake. And a good example is this prick, Fraser Barton, who is the head of the Law Society. Do you remember this guy? This story comes to us from the Otago Daily Times. Dunedin lawyer Fraser Barton has been cleared of an unsatisfactory conduct in relation to the destruction of historical abuse records. A statement released by the New Zealand Law Society this afternoon said Barton would resume his role of president from tomorrow, after being on a leave absence for more than 6 months. The Law Society received 2 complaints from within the legal profession about Mr. Barton's involvement in the destruction of records by Presbyterian Support Otago, but an investigation by a standards committee has resulted in no further action. Okay, so kids were being abused in care. The Presbyterian Support Otago organisation was one of the guilty organisations who had been abusing kids. They knew there was going to be a Royal Commission of Inquiry into this, and there was, and they got absolutely hauled out over the coals. What happened? They went to their lawyer and said, look, we're in trouble here. We've got all of these records. We really don't want people to see. What can we do with them? And he said, oh, you can just burn them. He fucking said that. He told them they could burn them. They did. All right, and all of that evidence was no longer available to the Royal Commission of Inquiry, and yet, according to the Law Society, this lawyer did nothing wrong. Who believes that to be true? Is there anyone outside of our utterly corrupt legal profession who doesn't think that this guy did something wrong? I doubt it. It was alleged he had brought the profession into disrepute by providing advice to the then Chief Executive Office of PSO, which resulted in the destruction of documents relevant to the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care report. Mr. Barton was on the board of PSO and acting in a governance role at the time, splitting hairs. So was he a lawyer then, or was he in a governance role? Fact is, this guy's the head of the Law Society. He kind of gets to make those sorts of distinctions. If it was you or I, we would not. The committee established that an email exchange on February 3rd, 2016 between Mr. Barton and the CEO of PSO was the only evidence of advice he provided. In it, the lawyer said records could be destroyed by a private organisation at an appropriate anniversary or milestone. The Standards Committee had no concern with that advice. The committee's view was that it could not be reasonably foreseen or expected that Mr. Barton would have known that his response would be relied on in relation to an instruction by the CEO in early 2016 to destroy records without further follow-up, discussion or advice or consideration of what an appropriate milestone or anniversary might be, a Law Society report said. The committee considered that the wording of the email implicitly invited follow-up for further consideration about when any destruction might appropriately occur. Okay, so according to the Royal Commission, goodness, they probably shouldn't have destroyed those documents. And according to the PSO, our lawyer told us we could destroy those documents. And then according to the Law Society, yeah, well, you probably shouldn't have listened to him, because his kind of email implied that you'd ask him again. Can anyone believe this horseshit? This is the sort of legal machinations that our corrupt judicial system engages in to ensure the little people get the full force of the law, but when guys like this fuck around, no one finds out. There was no evidence that Mr. Barton's advice was sought or given in contemplating of a Royal Commission of Inquiry commencing. It ruled, after assessing all the evidence before it, the committee did not consider that Mr. Barton's conduct breached any specific rule or met the definition of unsatisfactory conduct, and so took no further action on the complaints, the Law Society said. In the committee's view, to find a breach in circumstances of this type risks imposing an unrealistic burden on lawyers generally in terms of having to foresee unexpected actions. Foresee a Royal Commission of Inquiry? Everyone knew it was coming. Fucking everyone. The complaints against Mr. Barton highlighted professional issues that arise for lawyers when serving on boards in a non-legal role, the Law Society said. It was important lawyers were mindful of the risks involved in providing guidance that could constitute legal advice and ensure that any such advice was clear and considered, even when given in what may be taken as an informal context. On behalf of the Law Society Board, I'd like to express our confidence in Mr. Barton, Vice President David Campbell said. He brings a wealth of experience, knowledge, integrity, and community service to his position. I wonder how many children abused in that by that Presbyterian organisation in Otago share the Law Society's assessment of what this prick did. Let me know what you think in the chat. Eeryk, what do you reckon?
I'm left rather speechless, and completely honest. There's a lot there. I mean, it's blatantly corrupt, isn't it? And I think rather than discussing the specifics, and outside of saying that it's just a absolute disgrace that this sort of thing can go on whilst you've got so many people who have actually been victimized, more or less being fucked over for decades. But it brings me back to when you and I were at Golri's Garraman's hearing when she was convicted and sentenced and whatever, and how everyone around her was chumming. People in the legal profession, they were like, hey, look, we're going to do everything we can to ensure that you can still practice law, that this won't be the end. And the whole, even before the verdict came in, look, there's no way you're going to be done for this. You're going to be okay, and we can go, alluding to the idea.
Sorry to interrupt, Eeryk. For the audience, what Eeryk's talking about is that he and I were in court that day when Golriz was sentenced, and what he's alluding to is that she was very much, it was obvious to us, she was amongst friends. There was no one in the court, from the judge, from the prosecutor, from the security. Everyone was there loving her. They were cuddling her. That she was getting kisses from journalists. She was in home territory. She could not have been more coddled, cuddled and supported than she was. Do continue, Eeryk.
And so, yeah, it just brings me back to that. And it just goes to show that it's a club. You're either in the club or you're not in the club. If you're in the club, you get all the perks that come along with that, including every opportunity under the sun to salvage you from whatever position you've got yourself into, whether that's stealing, thousands of dollars worth of designer clothing, whether that's destroying evidence. You will be saved to the best of their ability, so long as you're in that club. If you're the average Joe, then you're screwed. You're going to have what is potentially just justice delivered, or perhaps injustice delivered to you, in the fact that you don't get the support and the outcome that would be deemed just in that situation, or you're just rightfully screwed over. So that's really that's where this whole article leaves me, at just thinking back to that moment. And if it's happened with Golriz, it's clearly happened here. How many more situations is this happening in, and how much has that dramatically shaped what's occurring in New Zealand today? I mean, you would have to say to a degree it's quite rife with everything that's going on, and the Waipōdata Trust, the whole scandal going on there with John Tamihire and the Manurewa Marae and everything. It's all very, very yuck. And so I think if we found ourselves in a situation where we really got a firm fist down on this corruption and kind of got rid of the people responsible, could we be seeing a dramatic difference? And that's something I'd like to see, although I don't think we've got anyone that's really in a position to do anything about it.
I think you're right, and it is corrosive, right? Like, if we let this stuff slide, this corruption, it's a cancer, and it just grows, and we're seeing it in so many fields of human endeavour. Like, we've got an utterly corrupt police force, we've got an utterly corrupt justice system, and the elites, as you say, are scratching one another's backs, right? We're about to see a whitewash from the IPCA that is supposed to be released over the next few days. There'll probably be another delay, but at least they're saying that this time they really do intend to publish. It is going to be a whitewash. It's going to utterly exonerate Jacinda Ardern, Chris Hipkins, all of those Green Party officials, all of the trade unions, all of the Chanel Lyles of the world, all of the people who went to Albert Park and beat the pulp out of men and women. Women and the elderly, all of those police officers, every single one of them is going to be exonerated, because that's just how things work. There are no consequences, and this is corrosive, and this is how you become a third world banana republic. Shelley the Kiwi says, just help move an elderly lady. Oh, I read that one. Debbie says, that's the norm. I can tell you of a lady that was trafficked from NZ. Oh, that's just revolting. I'm sorry to hear that, Debbie. That shouldn't happen to anyone. Shelley says, I left Dunedin 8 years ago to come home, did emergency respite care for then SIFs, that's Child, Youth and Family, and there were 942 kids in their care from the Dunedin office. 942, that's astonishing. I can see why they called OT now orphan traffickers. Yes, Shelley, that's just really depressing. Debbie says, my dad and I were searching for family, and that's how we found out and got in touch with her. She was over the moon when she realised that we were family. Talking about a lady who was trafficked. Well, that's a nice story. At least there was some family contact. All right, you got anything you want to talk about there from your people?
Yeah, Andrew says, if you don't believe in anything, i.e. postmodernism, you can be corrupt and not know it. Also says that apparently I could be Jay Dyer's twin. I don't know who Jay Dyer is, to be completely honest. Andrew also says that he can't share this. By this, you meaning the stream. I'm not entirely sure. But it does also say that good on you guys for getting this tech around your heads. Best content in New Zealand. I just watched an Alex Jones episode. He gets 100 million views a day. Something to aim for. Wouldn't that be something? But yeah, no, that's all we've got. So thank you, Andrew, for your contribution.
Well, I think we're into the last sort of half hour. We've got about 25 minutes left to go in the episode, and I think we've got some bits and pieces still to go. So I think we'll hand over to Eeryk. I think he's got a piece about Calvin Robinson for us. Let me bring that up.
Yeah, Calvin Robinson. He's a Catholic priest. Well, not really anymore, is he? As we'll talk about here. But yes, Calvin Robertson. He's based in Michigan,
Arizona now. Is it these days?
Yeah, I don't know. He's probably all over the place. But given what happened here, he's probably not staying put. Yeah. But yes, this is from CBS News. Who, funnily enough, I use primarily for my US election coverage because they had the best graphics. And it was written by some nobody from the US, no doubt. A Michigan priest had his license revoked by the Anglican Catholic Church after he mimicked a straight-arm gesture performed by Elon Musk during a speech earlier this month that some have interpreted as a Nazi salute. Calvin Robinson, who is listed as the priest in charge of St. Paul's Anglican Catholic Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, performed the gesture at the end of a January 25 speech at the National Pro-Life Summit in Washington, D.C., which is ironic because, you won't find many pro-life summits in Nazi Germany. On Wednesday, the Anglican Catholic Church posted a statement that said Robinson's license in the church has been revoked after he made a gesture that many have interpreted as pro-Nazi. While we cannot say what was in Mr. Robinson's heart when he did this, his actions appear to have been an attempt to curry favour with certain elements of the American political right by provoking its opposition, the statement read. Mr. Robinson had been warned that online trolling and other such actions, whether in the service of the left or right, are incompatible with a priestly vocation and was told to desist. Clearly he is not, and as such, his license in the church has been revoked. He is no longer serving as a priest in the ACC. Furthermore, we understand that this is not just an administrative matter. The Holocaust was an episode of unspeakable horror enacted by a regime of evil men. We condemn Nazi ideology and anti-Semitism in all its forms, and we believe that those who mimic the Nazi salute, even as a joke or an attempt to troll their opponents, trivialize the horror of the Holocaust and diminish the sacrifice of those who fought against its perpetrators. Such actions are harmful, divisive, and contrary to the tenets of Christian charity. Musk gesture that Robertson was mimicking came in a January 20 speech and was all about saying, "My heart goes out to you." And basically Robinson, in his January 25 speech, quoted Musk saying, "My heart goes out to you," before mimicking the straight arm motion. Robertson also said on Facebook that in case it needs saying, I am not a Nazi, and that was a gesture, that was a joke. And of course, if you don't know who Robinson is, he's from England, and in the past has been outspoken about his conservative views, according to a biography on St. Paul's Anglican Catholic Church website. Now, what I find interesting is they try to rationalize the decision by saying that he's been warned about this before, that he shouldn't be taking sides. It's not a priestly vocation to get political and, wind people up. I bloody disagree, to be completely honest with you. If I walk into a church, and they're not willing to take the absolute piss out of politics, I'm walking out, frankly. Pastors, whatever you want to call them out there, are the ones that can connect what they're discussing to the present day, to the leaders, to the decisions, to the policies, and outline its value, its place. And you consider and say, him taking the piss out of a Nazi salute can't really be tied to any scripture or anything that could be of value to a sermon. But I look at it and I'm thinking, okay, the guy is bringing attention to the church by being a public figure. He's a public figure that I only know of because of social media and the fact that he's outspoken. And frankly, he gives me a reason to be more involved with the church than the opposite. So he's bringing an inherent good. If your goal in life as a Christian, for example, is to bring people to the faith, then frankly, he's doing everyone a favor. And by highlighting the stupidity of the left, he's doing more people a favor. He's ensuring that people that go to, because there are plenty of woke Catholics out there, it seems, or at least woke Christians out there, it seems, these days. So if those people are rocking up into his church and he's taking the piss and he's highlighting the stupidity of it, maybe he's changing their minds. So as far as I'm concerned, what the Anglican Catholic Church has done here is they've decided to be political, try and give him a consequence for taking the piss out of the left being utter lunatics, and they're deciding that no, we don't want him to have a voice, at least not one that is attached to our name, because we have our views and they're fundamentally inconsistent with his, and so that's all I can really comment on it, other than to say that good on Calvin Robertson, because I see him do weird shit like this all the time, and frankly I back it. And I don't know what your kind of view on this sort of stuff is, Simon, but I'd like to hear it.
Well, okay. Well, I've got a lot of time for the man. And I don't always agree with him, but I think I think he's a fascinating fellow. He is a proper theologian, and he's a real thinker. And I don't always agree with his positions, but what I think is really what the Anglican Catholic Church is. And by the way, I'm not exactly certain what the difference is between the Anglican Church and the Anglican Catholic Church. I'm assuming they're different things. But what they seem to have forgotten here is that when it comes to Christianity and relevant Christians, you have the Pope. All right, the Pope, he stands there, on a balcony and he says something, and there's a billion Catholics, particularly in the third world places like Africa and South America, who hang upon his every word. All right. But outside of that, who are actually relevant Christians in our world? If Calvin Robertson is up there for non-Christians, if there is one Christian person that they are listening to, it is that guy. Because even if you don't agree with him, he is actually fascinating. He's very, very well connected. You see him doing really interesting bits and pieces on TV channels like GB News, or he's doing things with Lawrence Fox. He's doing Fox and Father as a show that those two guys do together. He's very, very active on social media. He's talking about current affairs. He's giving a Christian point of view. And, for these Christian faiths, from the outside looking in, for what the world sees of Christianity is the Justin Willoughby, or whatever his name is, who was the dude who was Archbishop of Canterbury until, who was just about the wokest person in the world, all about, tuning out priests and all that kind of stuff. He resigned, of course, in disgrace for covering up for another priest who was messing about with children. And that's just kind of the perception that the world has. Oh, you're a priest, you're woke, and you probably mess with kids. Calvin Robinson is not that. If these churches had anything like a fucking marketing department, they would realize that this is the guy who is going to get people into their churches, sitting into their pews. And particularly when what he did was absolutely fantastic. He was pointing out the hypocrisy of people who were ludicrously accusing a man of behavior he self-evidently did not commit. If there is one thing that Calvin Robinson could be accused of, it could be standing with a person who was being oppressed unfairly, which seems to me to be pretty much what the Christian church kind of looks to promote in the world, and yet he's been sanctioned. It is obviously wrong. I hope that there is some path forward here, because some archbishop somewhere in the United States from the Anglican Catholic Church, I'm not even sure who they are, decides that Calvin Robinson cannot preach anymore. Well, I tell you what, no one's ever heard of him. No one is even really sure who the Anglican Catholic Church is. That guy could start his own ministry and just be doing what he's doing, talking to people out in the world. He would do more to promote Christianity than this no-name archbishop ever will.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we've got that absolute creature, after the Trump inauguration, whatever that is, talking that wants to, trans our kids and all that sort of stuff. So the stark contrast between Calvin Robinson and whatever the hell that was is something to behold. But I do have a couple comments here. I think a couple people, Simon, very quickly were finding your stream a little bit choppy in a couple areas, so they came over to me because I'm like that. I got things working well. But Joel says that Calvin Robinson hit job could be pushed back because of the spectacle of that cringy lesbian minister lecturing about immigration to Trump. And
could be, Joel, could be.
Joel also says, I'd love a vibe check from the Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, etc. about the culture war. I actually feel like they're very... I'm thinking Jacinda Ardern was a former Mormon, so that I've always, since I heard that she was a Mormon, I've never looked at Mormons the same. Jehovah's Witnesses, I mean, I've known a couple in my life. I just find them all weird. I feel like they're more likely to be woke, but I wouldn't bloody know. There's that. Andrew says that in New Zealand, it's not cool to believe in God. I'm not going anywhere near a church round here. But remember, Jesus said, 2 or more that come together in my name is a church. That is fair. I'm sure there's at least 2 of us in the chat, myself included. So there we go. That's done. We're officially the Church of Eeryk and Simon. That's a done deal.
Well, yeah, we did that thing where we released the picture of you as the Pope and me as the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, well, that was episode 1, wasn't it? So we kind of we all knew it was coming. Any comments over there?
Phil says finding it a bit choppy. Yeah, Phil, that's interesting. I am seeing there's a few issues on the restreamer, but Eeryk and I are both going out via the same tech. So if one's working for you and the other isn't, that's good to know. But I don't know how, because it's pretty much the same source. Shelley says, get over all these thousands of people here tomorrow, and I'm going bush. Yes, Shelley, because Shelley's up, around Waitangi, and it's got to be, crazy times for the locals, right? Like you just have this influx of a whole bunch of angry people every year, and I'm sure it's good for the economy. I mean, I'm sure they're spending money and all that sort of stuff. But I feel for you. I feel for you, Shelley. You're probably having to deal with a whole bunch of foreigners effectively in your neck of the woods. All right, well, look, it's we've got about 15 minutes to go, and I do have another article that I wanted to bring up, which I should probably do now, and this comes to us from the Telegraph. It's about Sadiq Khan. Hang on, let me just bring that up. Sadiq Khan, for those who don't know, this guy is just terrible. He's the mayor of London, and he's this weird combination of Islamist and woke. All right, it's that that kind of left-wing Labour. I'm an Islamist, but it's quite helpful, all of this rainbow stuff. In the meantime, I'll get on board with that until we finally take over and can throw these people off the buildings. is kind of his approach to life, and he's just about the worst thing that's ever happened to central London. And what you can see is that there are now huge areas of London which have like what happened is you got with the particularly the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community, who were always kind of bolted on left-wing voters. That has changed quite a lot, where what has happened is they've taken over particular areas, and we are seeing this in places like Birmingham with the national elections, where you have Jess Phillips, who is the very, very prominent Labour politician, whose constituency is Birmingham Yardley. Now, she faces a massive press to be de-seated by the Islamist, particularly Pakistani and Bangladeshi factions within the Labour Party. But in London, they've taken it a step further. And in Tower Hamlets is an eastern borough. I used to live in it myself. It's quite central. It borders on Zone 1 in central London. Tower Hamlets is just completely controlled by Islamist racial groups, Bangladeshis, right? So you cannot win a local government election in Tower Hamlets unless you are Bangladeshi and Islamic, and it shows through in the social policies. So Tower Hamlets spends an awful lot of money in the Bangladeshi community. It's a real issue. Now, Sadiq Khan is one of those he comes from that sort of political ascendancy from within that community, and he can rely, at least on the moment, upon support from the woke and the leftists, as well as Islamic factions and Bangladeshi and Pakistani communities in particular. But what was really interesting this week is he broke ranks, and I thought this was fantastically well covered in the Telegraph by Mark Ludlow. The article reads this: Sadiq Khan appears to have dropped he/him pronouns from social media profile. Virtue signalling London Mayor's account on X no longer features gendered personal pronouns, but his Blue Sky account does. Well, isn't that fascinating? Sir Sadiq Khan, all right, unbelievably they gave this guy knighthood in the New Year's honours. That was the Labour Party. The Mayor of London appears to have removed his he/him personal pronouns from his profile on X. Sir Sadiq, who has been a vocal critic of the social media platform's owner Elon Musk and Donald Trump, the US president, and their war on woke, had previously used the he/him pronouns on his X account, where he has 3.1 million follows, but they have now disappeared. Here's the thing, he's not the only one. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has also removed her pronouns. Lots and lots of leftists have. The reason is that they are, as I said at the top of the episode, they are coordinated. All of the leftists around the world, they're reading from the same song sheet. The instruction goes out, we are not doing this anymore, and they all change like the NPCs that they are. Somewhere in the deep dark recesses of left-wing ideology, Klaus Schwab, maybe from the World Economic Forum, or whoever that Hungarian dude, what's his name, who does the Open Society, that billionaire guy, one of those left-wing coordination units organizations has said to all the leftists, yeah, beating up women in public parks isn't working for us. We can't convince everyone that men can change sex. We need to stop doing that because we are being defeated and people don't want men playing women's sports. So we're going to pull back from it. And you see this across the board, from even someone like Sadiq Khan, from the likes of Helen Clark, from the likes of Alexander Cortez, all of that sort of thing. Suddenly the pronouns are being removed. They are stepping back from troonery because they know it's a lost cause, because they know they have pushed the envelope way too far by putting men into women's prison cells, by putting adult men into teenage girls' sports and into their changing rooms. They realize that the general public was not going to tolerate it anymore, so they are withdrawing back just a little bit and pretending like all of this aspect of their wokery never was. What do you reckon, Eeryk?
Well, we don't so much have the issue with whole communities voting or voting for a particular person because they fit a particular ethnicity or anything, but we do have a similar issue of certain electorates being heavily populated by, let's say, university students, and that resulting, or even not just university students, but public sector workers in Wellington and so forth, and that's why we've got electorate MPs by the name of Julianne Genter of all people, and Tamitha Paul and Chloe Swarbrick, and so it highlights that when you've got people with such a dominant ideological position, or when you've got a region that's dominated by people with a particular ideological position, it often comes at the expense of results because they arguably picked the worst possible candidates for those three electorates simply because of ideology and having such dominance of the population. So it highlights that we're lucky it's not one that's based on race, at least not in our general electorates, but it does indicate that it's an issue that we probably should want to avoid. And I mean, I think about my electorate. My electorate's pretty heavy in the Indian population, and I'm thinking if Labor had have, let's say, put up an Indian candidate and said we will do better on things like ram raids and all of that stuff, whether that would have prevented the National Party candidate from winning, and there's the chance there that that's happened, but I feel like. At least in our case, it's not this entrenched, very ideological issue in our communities, even ones that are quite heavily the home of certain ethnic groups. So yeah, I think that's an issue to worry about potentially for the future if things don't really turn around. But in our case, it highlights the issue with stupid places like Wellington, and also our Māori electorate seats. Given that there is no good coming from those seats, there is no good candidate being elected. All that's being done there is a bunch of radical ideologues electing radical ideologues to implement radical change, and this is radical change which none of us want. That will only destroy the country, and it is destroying the country bit by bit. So. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and we see it a little bit. And it's one of the problems with MMP is that you get these you get these extremists, and while, as you say, we don't have those kind of like too much of the ethnic the ethnic backing for a particular candidate, other than, of course, perhaps the Maori party and the Maori electorates. What we do is we get that ideological capture with party votes for candidates that no one ever actually particularly wants or votes for. And you get these extremists, particularly foreign extremists like Taco Tinkerbell from Mexico, like Julianne Genter, and a whole host of people. New Zealand has become a dumping ground for these far left extremists who get into our parliament. No one actually votes for them, but they vote for parties that they belong to. So they get selected by a bunch of other weirdos and are imposed upon the rest of us. So that's we do. I think that's probably as close as New Zealand gets to that sort of thing. But what we do see is that they are all part of that same tendency, right? Like the moment that AOC removes her pronouns is the same moment that Sadiq Khan, the Islamist London mayor, removes his pronouns. Helen Clark, Julianne Genter, all of these people, right? Because they are coordinated with their strategy and their tactics inside their overarching ideology. Right, well, I see we've got 4 minutes left. What do you reckon's going to happen for the rest of the week? What are you keeping your eye on?
The rest of the week. Well, it'd be interesting to see as kind of more commentary around the MAGA strip. The brand new MAGA strip, otherwise formerly known as the Gaza Strip. What happens with the whole announcement around there? That'll be interesting. So there's that. Waitangi Day tomorrow. It's same old Waitangi Day. Maybe some more microphone stealing if anyone that's got the wrong opinion does any talking. But honestly, I don't expect this week from here on out it's going to be too dramatic. Though it has been a pretty wild start to the year, so you never say never. Maybe another plane will fall out the sky.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be. I think a lot of the world is focusing upon international affairs. You know, like there's such a sea change in the United States. You look at what's happening, like with US aid and the corruption around the money that was being spent on pushing, very, very particular ideology and paying off people and all that sort of stuff. Everyone knows it's been going on for decades and decades. And finally, there's someone in the form of Donald Trump and Elon Musk that is shutting it down and also exposing some light on it. So I think that a lot of the world's focus is going to be upon that. Domestically, like you say, I'm really interested to see what happens. Well, not really interested, but knowing that it's going on tomorrow, we're going to get the typical unhinged reaction from extremists, one would guess, at Waitangi tomorrow, while most Kiwis just kind of get on with having a barbecue, as we tend to do in this part of the world. At this time of year, it's a day off where people sort of get together with family and friends and, have a couple of beers. I think that's what most people do. But yeah, so there'll be some interest around that. There'll be some interesting commentary around all of that sort of stuff. Maybe some fireworks. But the other thing that I'm interested in domestically is Paul Goldsmith. Paul Goldsmith is another wokester, part of that cabal of blue-green that includes Simon Watts and Nicola Willis and Cindy Boy Lux and all of those people. He's asked the Law Commission to pursue hate crime laws, and you can see that our police have effectively, under another wokester, Mark Mitchell, introduced it. New Zealand doesn't have hate speech laws, but our police have introduced it anyway. They are enforcing hate speech laws that don't actually exist, and hate crime laws. They say that whenever anyone paints over their chosen people, the Troons paints over one of their rainbow pedestrian crossings, it's a hate crime. It is not a hate crime because there is no such thing as a hate crime. The New Zealand police just invented it, and Mark Mitchell is happy to go along and enforce their non-laws. They are trying to effectively, retroactively, make what the police are doing legal. Paul Goldsmith has instructed the Law Commission to pursue hate crime legislation, which of course includes hate speech legislation. Effectively, what this means is if you say, as happens in Britain today, that a man cannot be a woman, then you are going to jail. A similar thing happened to a chap. I don't agree with this. A guy was making a political protest. I thought it was all a bit puerile, but he went into central Manchester and burnt a Quran publicly and filmed himself doing it. He has been prosecuted for that. I think the guy is a bit of a twat because not only did he do that in a political protest, he didn't follow through with it. The police charged him with a racially aggravated hate crime rather than pleading innocent, which he should have done because Britain got rid of its blasphemy laws and Islam is not a race, it's a religion. He should have stuck to his guns and pled innocent. Instead, what he did is he just caved, pled guilty, and has given the regime and the police really, really helpful case law for the next person who they want to accuse of blasphemy or a hate crime. So I'm keeping an eye on those kind of issues. I think that this is all really, really disappointing that New Zealand is following in the footsteps of this wokery and these sorts of laws that have caused absolute chaos in countries like Great Britain, the United States, and Canada. The United States is extremely fortunate that they have in their First Amendment free speech rights that are being eroded in our part of the world. So that's something that I'm going to look forward to having a look at. All right. Well, look, on that note, I think that's probably everything from me. Guys, I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. I'm going to be back on Sunday night doing Simon TV. Hopefully I won't have any of the technical issues that made me so angry last week and caused me to throw my toys out of the cot and cut the episode short. Eeryk, what are you up to?
Yeah, so I want to thank everyone firstly for tuning in today. Got about a couple hundred overall. I'm sure far more on Simon's End. That's great. It's all the same place, so we love it. But yeah, I've got some reasonably big things coming. I've got a lot of time to fill over the next few days to get a couple things prepared as my X profile and all my other profiles don't lie. I am indeed powered by the underground network, so I should probably start making that obvious. And so that will link into what I have coming in the next few days, what I'm rebooting. So I'll keep an eye out for that. I'm being a little bit vague, but keep an eye out for that in the next few days. I will try and have it all sorted and up and running by this time next week. I'll let you know if I don't. But yeah, I've got quite a lot of work to do to get that prepared. That'll be fun. That'll be I don't know. There'll be a good chunk of effort going into that. So hopefully I don't disappoint. But outside of that, I'm probably going to kickback. Probably by my standards is not what's going to be happening tomorrow. Probably am going to be doing something constructive. So if you are doing anything that's not the norm tomorrow, I hope you all enjoy it, because I probably will be doing something rather different, though I likely won't enjoy it. So anyways, I'll have fun nonetheless. I always have fun. But that's me. Thanks everyone.
Yep. All right. And that's thanks everyone from me. See you all on Sunday night. Otherwise, see you for the next time when we do another Eeryk and Simon episode. I'm going to let Itchy and Scratchy take us out.
Eeryk and Simon. Eeryk and Simon.